Thank you all for coming to this session. It is an honor to be here. My name is Emma Bloomberg, and I am the CEO and founder of Murmuration. Murmuration's mission is to transform the politics of public K-12 education. We believe that every child in America deserves access to a high-quality public education and that our political system is part of the problem that is preventing that. So we work with organizations across the country who are seeking to identify voters, to elevate voices in communities, and ultimately to elect education champions. We provide them with data, tools, technology, research, analytics, and strategic supports so that they can affect change at a state and local level in their own communities through organizing work, through advocacy work, and through electoral work. Earlier this week, Murmuration, in partnership with the Walton Family Foundation, released a study on Gen Z. That's why you are all here today. We knew that there had been lots of research done on Gen Z, but also that there was a real opportunity to start to go deeper. And we partnered with Walton. We were lucky enough to get to partner with Walton because we really share a common interest and a common belief in this generation. We see them as literally the future, but see lots of potential for them to help to reshape our society. And we're really excited to just have an opportunity to go deeper. Again, because we know that lots of research had been done on Gen Z, this project was structured to try to get a little more nuance. We thought about questions, asked questions of Gen Z like, how do you see yourself in society? What are your professional goals for the next phase of your life? Do you think that the public K-12 education system has prepared you for the challenges ahead? And I think perhaps most importantly, what do you expect from the rest of us? What do you expect from leaders in government, in politics, in corporations, in communities? What do you expect from society? The goal in building on pre-existing research was really to be able to create some actionable recommendations. We see an opportunity here to help to connect generations, to take leaders from sectors across the country, from prior generations, help them to better understand this generation, help this generation to be more engaged, to have more avenues into the existing structures, and ultimately to really unlock potential. We believe deeply in the transformative power of this generation. Everything that we've gotten to know about them over the last handful of years and everything that we continue to learn suggests that our future really is in their hands. So our mission here, our job with this research and further research, is to help to unlock that potential. Of course, one research study can't do it all, so we are working on what that next phase of research looks like, digging in on messages and frames that we think can help to well-position existing generations, leaders in existing generations, to foster dialogue and ultimately to help to unlock the potential of this generation and reshape our society over the decade to come. So it is my distinct honor, my role here this morning is to get to introduce you to someone I think of as one of the preeminent, if not the preeminent researcher on Gen Z, perhaps in the world. He has spent the last 2 years studying young generations in depth, their connection to politics, their connection to education, their connection to myriad other issues. His name is Della Volpe. We've had the pleasure of working on a handful of research projects together, but this one has certainly, I think, been the most fun. And so, John, it's my honor to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Emma, and Brian and Romy Drucker from Walton Family Foundation for the opportunity to collaborate on this important project. You all have copies of the deck there. There's more information as well on the Murmuration website, which you see posted behind me. What I'm going to do now for the next 10 minutes is to kind of walk you through some of the major highlights. But first, I want to kind of ground you in Generation Z, because so many people are talking about Gen Z. I think far fewer are actually listening to and understanding what Gen Z is all about. We're talking about, and that has to change, right? That has to change. And that is changing, I think, from this opportunity here. And as I was saying to Emma and Romy, this is the most Gen Z forward conference agenda that I've been a part of. And for 21 years at the Institute of Politics at Harvard, I've been focused on younger Americans, first millennials and now Generation Z. So when we talk about Gen Z, I'm not somebody who believes you have to have a certain month or year to be part of a generation. It's a collective of a series of events. We're talking roughly people born in the late 1990s through the mid 2012, 13, 14 era, middle school kids through folks in their mid 20s. Okay, 70 million Americans. They are the largest and they are the most diverse and most educated generation in America today. And they've come of age, I think, as many of us are beginning to appreciate, in a time of tremendous, tremendous chaos and trauma. If you can imagine some of their first experiences as young people born right on either side of 9/11 was the effect of the Great Recession. We know that 80% of Americans lost 20% of their wealth during that time. Tens of millions of people lost their homes, and the financial anxiety was felt at such an early age, and psychologists can still see the effects of that, specifically on young Gen Z men. When you think about their first experiences in schools, unlike many of ours, perhaps, it was anything but safe. We had the rise of gun violence and school shootings and these red alert school shooter drills. Add to that the rise of white nationalism, opioid abuse, and after a period of about 10 years of relative stability in the first part of the first decade of the century, we saw a 47% increase in the number of deaths by suicide when this generation began to turn into their mid-teen and adolescent years. So Gen Z, from the very, very beginning, has lacked the sense of security that their parents and their grandparents' generation often took for granted. Unlike baby boomers, silent generation, my generation, Gen X, or millennials, they've never known a time when America was divided. Every generation has chaos, every generation has trauma, every generation has challenges that they need to overcome. But this generation doesn't remember America United. They don't have a memory of September 12th or September 13th, or the impression that winning when the U.S. hockey team in 1980 beat the Russians. They've been robbed of that collective experience. In addition to that, there's been a tremendous whiplash in our politics through the eyes of these young people as they're beginning to understand their values and what they think about the world. The whiplash between an 8-year relatively stable presidency and administration of President Obama to the more contentious presidency of Donald Trump, where even today we see that our elections are questioned, just additional chaos and trauma that young people are having to deal with. I write about in the book called Fight about 5 issues, 5 significant events that have shaped the values of this generation. We have income inequality through the lens of of Occupy Wall Street, climate change, the Parkland movement, of course, systemic racism, which in the aftermath of George Floyd's death and significant other events. Those events, rather than turning away because of the trauma and the fear and the anxiety, have led this generation to participate at levels no other young generation has ever participated in national elections. 2018 and 2020, we saw record-breaking turnout for this generation. When millennials and Xers and baby boomers were in their 20s, they voted roughly half the level of Generation Z in the 2018 midterm elections. There's still a lot of upside there, a lot of ways to go, but this is a generation that has chosen on 2 occasions, 18 and 20, to vote at record levels. It's a progressive, but also a solution-based mindset. We talk so much about this country being divided 50-50. It certainly is. I like to think this, though, it's divided 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 of folks in their mid-40s and younger have a set of values that align with a lot of what we're talking about today with Gen Z. 2/3 of folks in their 50s and 60s have a different set of values, certainly when it comes to politics. So what does this mean? What does this add up to? Gen Z will change, and I argue is changing everything. The question is how, right? They're changing our civic life. They're changing politics, the way they think about school, public school, higher education, work, of course, technology, culture, family, and what their aspirations are, as Emma mentioned. So that's the kind of the background in terms of what we did to create this report. In May, we spent a couple weeks on the road in Houston and Atlanta and Columbus and virtually throughout Arkansas, talking to relatively large groups in a qualitative research setup of Gen Z. And then we conducted a very large national survey of nearly 4,000 members of this generation between the ages of 15 and 25. And we conducted another 1,100 interviews with folks older from other generations so we can make some comparisons. The first of four kind of themes that I'll share is that obviously this generation is stressed, they're in crisis, but there's no indication that they're giving in. You know, compared to other generations, millennials through silent generation, this generation is twice as likely to battle depression and feelings of hopelessness. This, though, is something that we've been measuring before COVID. This is something that I picked up kind of in my research as early as 2017, kind of from a sociology or political science kind of perspective. They are 3 times as likely as other generations to report thoughts of self-harm multiple times over the last 2 weeks. 25% of folks between 18 and 29-year-olds indicated that more days than not over the last 2 weeks have had thoughts of self-harm, 5 to 6% every single day. Those numbers have not really changed over a couple of years. Half of this generation is working with someone, has a close friend, family member, or colleague who is battling depression of their own. A third knows someone who has been a victim of sexual assault. A quarter knows someone dealing with a drug addiction. A fifth knows someone who's been who's died by suicide, and a 7th or 14, 15% know someone who's been a victim of gun violence. This is the way that they're carrying on their shoulders every single day. And when I ask them in research settings or informally, what don't people like me understand about your generation, they say parents, mentors, teachers, our bosses, other generations, they don't understand. It's not just about technology or screen time. It's about these underlying challenges that they have that they're trying to process and put into context in their own mind. And too often, not only do they not understand, but they're dismissive. They're dismissive. But what is so, I find incredibly inspiring about this generation is, despite those challenges that I walked through quickly, they still see folks more vulnerable than themselves. They're willing to put themselves out there, and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. So when you ask a young person why they're voting, they typically tell me they're voting for someone else. They're voting for someone else who has less access and less rights than they do. More than 2 in 5 strongly agree, not just agree, but strongly agree with a lot of passion that they want to make their community and their country better. That's more than millennials. When we ask about millennials or Xers or boomers, wherever you are, there are dozens, hundreds, thousands, or potentially millions of young people who want to do more to engage kind of in their community to make things more just, I think, for folks. Government's tough, right? They're losing their faith, as we know, in government and politics, but of course, they still see the importance of engagement. 2/3 reject. We have kind of a, do you agree or disagree with a couple of different statements, and 2/3 kind of reject this cynical view that why bother? Why bother? Change is so hard. We can't really kind of see the effects. Why bother? Just take care of yourself is one of the arguments. But 2/3 rejected that, and they believe that change is possible. They believe that they have no choice but to participate in every single way. When I started looking at young Americans a couple of decades ago, only 1/3 voted in presidential elections in terms of Xers and millennials, but they volunteered. The optimism I have so much is because of the increasing levels of volunteerism, but also voting. You can see here, again, almost 50% want to be part of something that improves their community and their country. So what do they care about? Again, this survey was conducted in basically the couple weeks after Uvalde Day. To give you some perspective, we had 20 questions. We say, how central are these questions to the future of America that you want to live in? How would you prioritize these issues? We found that 82% say it's very important, that we stop school shootings. 82%. It's an incredibly high number in terms of that top box on a 5-point scale. 72% say protecting access to clean water and fresh air. 71% indicate guaranteeing a quality education for every child. That was number 3, essentially tied for number 2 across 20+ questions that we asked about the future of America. Again, they see people more vulnerable than themselves, and they want to be a part of changing that system. And over 2/3 indicate that preserving individual rights and freedoms is something that is very important issue to tackle in America. Again, this is done a couple days after Uvalde, but this is something over the last year that picked up in a series of polls. This language used to be something that folks on the right would own, but now this is something that folks in the center as well as the left are really rallying around. And I think a lot of the topics that we think about over the last couple of days kind of fit within that broader category. 23% I just have here legalizing marijuana as a very important priority. I put this in here because whenever I typically give a speech or write a memo to an elected official that say, why didn't you talk about legalizing marijuana? The reason I didn't is because it's the bottom on a list of many other things above it. Most Zoomers don't believe in that we're listening to them, that we care, that we're listening. The critical institutions, whether it's the companies that they work for, the schools that they attend, the universities, certainly our elected officials. Only about 1/3 at best indicate that the brands, actually, that they are most likely frequent kind of understand their values. When we ask about education, it's about 30%. When we ask about elected officials or politicians, it's only about 18, 20, 22%. So when we think about what they aspire to over the next decade or couple decades of their lives, they have a very different, I think, definition in some ways than we might expect. Independence, financial independence, literally getting out of their parents' houses is a key driver in terms of what they think about. Their definition is relatively modest. You know, they want to be independent, which is a challenge with the issues related to the cost of higher education, of course. They want to be part of a community, and they want to find work that's fulfilling, that makes them feel good, that they're able to contribute both to their workplace as well as to the broader community. They are not interested in their parents' jobs. This is the first time I've asked this question. We had 5 or 6 different categories that are descriptive of the potential jobs that you have in the economy today. We found that most Zoomers are interested in finding work that provides some ability for them to be creative, to be unconventional, and to work with other people. Social skills. Those are the attributes that are most appealing to their work. Only about 1 in 10 really are interested in the kinds of jobs that define many of their parents and their grandparents, whether it's clerical work or management, sales, office-related to work. You know, when we think about this generation, they're not living to work, they're working to live and pursue the passions that kind of create the identity that's such an important part of who they are. We talked about financial independence just quickly. 79% say this is very important. One of the things that you'll see in this report is how important things are relative to where the gaps are in terms of what they're able to achieve so far. But I think a lot of this financial independence is driven by their understanding of the generation that preceded them in terms of millennials. They know that a majority of millennials lived at home until the age of 30, mostly because of the Great Recession. But money is not everything to this generation. You know, having harmony, not balance, you know, is harmony, though, I think is the word that they prefer to use between their work life and their home life is critical. Feeling important, feeling their role is valued, feeling passionate, having benefits, healthcare, other benefits, feeling valued at work, also something that drives this generation. Like legalizing marijuana, actually, among all the 16 or so different variables that we asked, remote work is at the bottom of that list. People like flexibility, but it's a means to the end of those other issues that I talked about just a moment ago. So as Emma mentioned, the last series of questions in the survey, we said, okay, reflect now. We asked you, what's important in your life, what your values are, how are we doing collectively as stewards of the education system? And we found that only half of this generation believes that their local school, the K through 12 public school, prepared them well for success. Only 16% say, I feel very well prepared from my schools. When we narrowed the focus and we asked a similar question about their preparation to engage in politics and civics and be an active and engaged citizen, the number went from 51%, which is, an F, I suppose, right, to 37% saying they feel prepared to be active and engaged citizens. So to wrap it up, what does it mean? We know that Gen Z has made tremendous change already in America. President Biden is not in the White House today without Gen Z's level of participation and their support in the 5 critical battleground states. Donald Trump won the vote of folks over the age of 40 in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Without young people at this table, we don't have gun legislation. We don't have our first African-American female in the Supreme Court and many, many other things. They're changing America more than they appreciate, more than we appreciate. And by understanding their values and what's driven them to this point, unless we do that, we're not able as leaders, I think, to work with them, to collaborate, to create the necessary change that's required throughout all of our systems, education, government, corporate, nonprofit world, and technology. So what's next? We're going to be here. We have plenty of more questions based upon this research that we need to kind of dig into, but we encourage you to ask us. If you've got questions you're interested in, we're happy to ask them. And in terms of how to create similar kind of conversations within your own spaces, we're happy to do that. And to kick that off right now, it is my honor again to thank Romy for her support, but to now introduce Romy Drucker and 3 incredible members of this generation to have a conversation about this research in their life. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. The Walton Family Foundation believes deeply in intergenerational change. And before we hear from the Zoomers on this stage, I'd like to invite a speaker into the conversation who also shares this deep commitment to the idea of intergenerational change, and that's Usher Raymond. When he heard we were doing this session, he was thrilled to lend his voice, and he is somebody who has dedicated his career and his social capital to centering and elevating youth voice. Usher, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thanks so much, Romy, for having me, and so happy to be a part of this conversation.
We just heard a presentation of the research, and the big headline, Usher, was that Gen Z is changing everything. Can you share some reflections from your perspective on the research?
With regards to the research, I think that, change happens in real time. I think that we are in a time where young people not only want you to support their vision and also to support them, but give them the tools that they need in order to go forward in their lives. Rather, they engage in being entrepreneurs. Rather, they need to address issues in their community and be more empathetic. All of these are things that we really focus on as mentors in my New Look Foundation, but also too, it's something that I think is really preparing them to be future leaders.
You could be choosing to invest your energy in a lot of different causes, Usher, and you have dedicated your work through the New Look Foundation to elevating the work of youth. Can you tell us a little bit about that effort?
Well, yes, as I said, speaking as a 20-year organization that has really fought to activate young people, not just take a topical approach and say, hey, this is the benevolent idea of how it historically has worked, and give them the tools that they actually need, prepare them, no pun intended, usher them through the process to college, and then going out into society and really create change that's significant in a way that they feel is actually changing the story, changing the narrative. We change it from the inside, not necessarily just the past. I do think that peer-to-peer is one of the greatest aspects of what we do. It's not dictating to them how the world is going to change. It's supporting the world that they want to change, giving them the tools that they need in order to change their community, in order to be prepared, in order to go forward and be passionate, and also to be disruptive, if at all possible, to this idea of what we think has worked.
Well, no offense to you, Usher, but we're about to hear from the real stars of the session, these three young people on stage. What should the audience be listening for?
Cues, I think, to hear them. I think that they have the solution. You know, there's this song, we all know it, Whitney Houston, I believe the children are our future, where the future is now. Here we are in real time, and this is an opportunity to really impact change, and they're gonna do it. Give them the opportunity, give them the stage. Yeah, sure, it's great that we have an idea, but it is actually going to be their responsibility, their duty to be able to change it. And we have to hear them. We have to hear from them. We have to honestly understand and support them. We have to prepare them. We have to give them the tools that they need.
Well, that's a wonderful introduction to this panel. Usher, Raymond, thank you so much for joining us. Let's give Usher a round of applause. And for our students who are here on stage, I am so excited to have the three of you up here to talk directly to this group of influencers about your experiences. And most importantly, I want them to know your story. So Ayanna, could we start with you? And I'd like to have each of you introduce yourselves.
Well, yes, thank you for having me. So my name is Ayanna Gross, and I am a rising junior at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a biology major with a double minor in chemistry and women and gender studies. And I picked my educational path because STEM has always been very important to me. But I fell in love with gender studies in my junior year of high school, and I knew it was something that I needed to continue to learn about, to continue to pursue, to help me grow individually as a person, but also to help me communicate and learn more about others. And I am going to medical school fall 2024, and I know that having that gender studies minor is going to help me be a better physician. And this summer, I am finishing my second year as a Chicago Eyes on Cancer research scholar, and I'm learning more about myeloproliferative neoplasms with clinical research with Dr. Odeniki and Dr. Patel. But I am also finishing my second internship with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to learn more about my new community in Baltimore, to find a better way to market strategies, to better use dredge material so that we can restore the islands around the Chesapeake Bay, and to ensure that a lot of the communities in Maryland do not essentially go underwater because of climate change.
Thank you. Della, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
So good morning, everyone. I am Della Lawrence. I am a rising junior at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. I am a student athletic trainer. I am involved with NAACP. I am also a yard ambassador for the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. And as of right now, I am a Walton investment team intern for the summer. So what I do as far as community, I've always had a heart to give back. I've always had a heart to go and do these services because I know that there's a bigger plan regarding what you do now. So I have a passion for the future. So what I do is I mentor younger women who are at-risk teens who may not know where to go or what to do with their lives. And I also go and volunteer at community centers, and I just have a passion to invest in the youth, essentially. I have a passion to do what I know is beneficial and impactful for the future, because the future is, we're the generation now, but the future is even more important. And I also am a business administration student, and I have a passion for not only nonprofits, but also going into the business world.
Thank you so much, Della. And Krasi, tell us your story. How did you get up on this stage?
Yeah, of course. My name is Krasi, or Krasimir Staykov. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a rising sophomore at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. So in terms of how I ended up here, I think growing up I had a very maybe non-traditional experience with the public education system. I grew up and still live in a working class neighborhood in Lexington, and so the schools that I was districted for did not really have a lot of resources but my parents had higher education and were very supportive of me pursuing education. Despite that, my parents are immigrants, so I was pushed into an English second language program for the first 3 years of my education experience, despite not needing it and repeatedly trying to leave it. So I kind of saw that end of the education system, but pretty early on in my schooling, I was also tracked into the magnet program in the district, which works by housing smaller programs within the low-income and traditionally underperforming schools. So when I came into that program, I really saw this huge disparity of resources. And I think seeing that difference between what was allocated to me when I was indicated as gifted versus not really pushed me towards education change-making. So now I am a senior advisor and board member of the Kentucky Student Voice team, which is a youth-led nonprofit in the state that works to advance education justice and make sure that our public schools work best for everyone, not just those they were initially designed for. Through that work, I've done a lot of legislative and research-oriented projects to really advance, what young people need in our school system. So yeah, really happy to be here.
I'd like to hit a few themes that John elevated in his presentation in the research, and start with the crisis around mental wellness and well-being. This is something that Gen Z has been dealing with since before the pandemic, and we know that the effects of the pandemic created a sense of isolation and disconnectedness. Krasi, could we start with you, and could you share a little bit of the work that you've done to support mental health and well-being in the state of Kentucky?
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, one of the roles that I held in the Kentucky Student Voice team was legislative work. So I led a lot of our projects during the 2020 legislative year. And as part of that, we were really looking at ensuring that students across the state had adequate access to mental health resources in their schools. Kentucky has a very, very poor student counselor ratio that is much higher than the 250 to 1 recommended one at a national level. So when I and my team at the Kentucky Student Voice team looked at that, we saw that really there was a dearth of resources and young people were struggling and not finding that support. We knew that in the year prior to that, we had seen a major school safety bill pass the state legislature that promised to allocate funding to things like physical militarization of schools, metal detectors and security guards and things of that nature, but also mental health supports. And so we really wanted to ensure that in the following year, where funding was actually allocated towards that bill, we didn't just set the mental health stuff aside. So I worked with a team of about 8 students at the Kentucky Student Voice team, and we really did a full-scale lobbying push, meeting with key legislators in the Education Committee of both the House and the Senate at the state level, as well as just other party leaders, and really pushed, we need these resources. These are essential. This is not something you can set aside and, fix school safety with just metal detectors and making sure that students are very police. And so I think at the end of that project, we ended up being pretty successful. Despite, a funding cut due to COVID, we ended up with a $7.4 million allocation towards increasing counselors in the state of Kentucky. And I think as a part of that work, I really registered just how essential it is to have a community of students to really push for change, but also that a pretty small number of people can actually generate a significant impact, especially when you get more local.
Does this theme of equitable access to resources resonate with you, Ayanna? What has been the conversation amongst your peer group about this issue?
I think for me, serving as president of Students Open to Unique Love, which is the only LGBTQ gay organization on Morgan State's campus, there's definitely a lack of resources. I see that people are trying, but there's not enough effort that's going through, and we are working as a small team as well to have an LGBTQ resource center, because while we are within the Black community, we are also our own community. It's important for us to have separate resources so that we can thrive as well.
Della, anything you'd like to add to the question of how your peer group is navigating this issue?
Yes, so mental health and mental illness has been a topic but it's very well swept under the rug a lot of the times. A lot of people don't want to be open about the situation. A lot of people don't want to share what they're going through because they feel those will not understand or they won't relate to them. And the research as far as college campuses and universities is just, they say that they're there, but they're not pushed. They're not given to the students. So a lot of the times, students are expected to reach out to someone else. And mental health is a very sensitive subject, and a lot of students do not want to reach out or don't know how to go about the situation. So we have to learn to push the resources. We have to learn to make it known that they are available to those students and the people in our generation, because a lot of the times that is not known.
I want to go to the theme that John elevated about the purpose of education and whether your education is adequately preparing you for success in life. And you all are in the process of redefining what that means. So Della, could you start with, I'd like to start with you and hear your reflections on, did your education set you up for success, and what are some of the areas that you think schools and systems should be more focused on to prepare students for this next leg of their journey?
Yes, so the education system, I believe, provides the basis for your education. It prepares you for the next level of education rather than life skills, rather than knowing how to budget, rather than knowing how to successfully interview with someone, rather to know how to act and conduct yourself in a place of business. So with the education system, a lot of the curriculum is just based on a subject. It's based on the knowledge that you need to know as far as if you want to go on the next level in your education. So high school essentially prepares you for college on the educational level, but it does not prepare you for life. We need to know we need financial literacy. We need to know how to buy a house. We need to know how to invest in our futures. We need to know how to adequately give back and make sure that we are making a difference for future generations. With you learning math or science or communications is important, but we need to push those life skills and those things that prepare you for life, because the job that you get, you learn more on the job than you learn going through school. And that is an issue. We need to know how to give those resources to students to know where to go the next step in life, not just the next step in education or college or PhD or graduate program.
Ayanna, would you share some reflections on your education and how it prepared you for this future that you're having?
Yes, so I had a little bit of a different experience. I think that for me, my high school prepared me very well. I also recognize that both of my parents are educators, and so I think that my involvement in high school has definitely been pushed by them. And because my high school prepared me so well, I feel prepared to go to college. I feel prepared to write the 12-page papers, to sit in the biology lectures for 3 hours. And for me, because I am going to medical school, my biology is going to be very useful, very important. But I also recognize that my experience in high school and feeling prepared and feeling as if all of the staff and the counselors supported me is very different from every student in my class. I graduated in a class of about 404 people, and I recognize that there are some people in the class who felt like they weren't heard, who felt like they weren't seen, or if their classes didn't teach them as well, because while teachers try their hardest, every student does not learn in the same way. And so figuring out a way to present all of your information in a more digestible manner for all of your students is something that all teachers need to work on so that every student can feel like they're having the experience I had.
Krasi, what do you believe is needed in education, and what is the Kentucky Student Voice team advocating for?
Right, so I think that generally there's this kind of vaguely careerist orientation when we talk about education nowadays that says that like young people need to be prepared for the jobs that they're going to take on. And I think from a personal perspective, I'm a bit more skeptical of that framing, because I think if we're really focusing on building schools that teach people how to be engaged citizens, that teach people how to engage in terms of critical thinking, writing, interacting with their local community, understanding how they fit into the places that are around them. When we build those skills, that translates to a job. You know, we don't have to worry about making sure that students can 100%, do this one very specific formulaic aspect of a job. If we can teach people the broader skills, then I think they can translate that into whatever role they need. In terms of the Kentucky Student Voice team and how we're looking at education, I think as part of that active citizenship, we're really asking how can young people be involved in the governance and the creation of their own education? What does it look like when students are meaningfully involved in running their school? In making sure that whatever concerns that they have individually are addressed in their community. What does it look like when young people are given the tools to do research in their own school to see how do my peers feel about these issues? And then not only to just do that research, but to present it and to use it to create change. So I think that engaged element of studenthood is something that's not discussed very often, but to me is central in making sure that our schools prepare people to not just move through life, but actively be in positions where they can take control and create change.
This is a big question for millennials and older generations. What does it mean to trust and invest in and engage your generation effectively? So could you share some tips and advice for the group of people in this room on what does that look like? Is it just tools? Is it putting you on more stages? What does it actually mean to invest? Ayanna, could we start with you?
Yes, I think that choosing to invest in us and choosing to trust us requires you not only to listen to us, but to actually hear what I'm saying, to open your mind to believe that you can learn from me. While it is very true that you can learn from your elders, it's also very true that you can learn from us. There are very different experiences that we have because of our age, because of the different communities that we are a part of, and because of our different interests. And so I think it's very important to enter the room, to enter the conversation with the idea of, I am here to learn from someone else, and if someone else learns something from me, then that's great, rather than believing that you are here and the sole person to lead and guide the youth, because we want to follow you, but it is important that rather than following, we are walking together to lead.
Della, what does it look like for you to feel trusted by the people in this room?
So I just look at all of the different things that Gen Z is doing in the community. We are not only starting nonprofits, we are doing hours and hours of community service. We are doing these things, we're entrepreneurs, we're starting up businesses, we're doing these things that are evident that we will make a change. And the importance is support. We need support from those who are younger than us, those who are our elders. We need support from everyone and known to be trusted that we will make a difference. What we put in place will be successful because we are a hardworking generation. We are a generation that is results-oriented. We strive to see results. We strive to see that what we're doing is making a difference. So if you trust in our generation and you trust that we will make these changes, everything will go a lot smoother. We will have a lot more support. We will have a lot more opportunity to do these things. We just need support and trust as far as knowing that we will get the job done.
Krasi, I'd love for you to reflect on the same question.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most direct way to really create that support is just to put young people in the room, give them the resources that they need to engage fully as peers in any sort of work that's being conducted. I think so often work about young people, whether that's education or nonprofit work that just aims to serve young people, kind of just assumes that the adults in the room already know what young people need and then that they can just kind of do it for them. And if younger people are brought into the room, it's kind of in this token position. But if you really, put your money where your mouth is, you really believe that young people can create change and have value, then, bring us in as peers, allow us to have those decision-making roles, allow us to guide where the work goes and don't just leave it in the hands of, adults who assume that they know best. And I think from there, that change really steps in. And I also just want to flag that often the young people that get brought into the room, myself included, have a lot of privilege. And so being intentional about bringing in people who face marginalization, who aren't often given those resources, is just probably the most crucial part of it for me.
Before we open it up for one or two audience questions, I want to ask you what you're hopeful about. There's a lot of issues that you all are inheriting as you step into your power. And also what our research shows is that you are prioritizing what I think are the ones that sort of matter most to our civic fabric, matter most to our country. What are you optimistic about in this moment? And maybe we could just go down the line.
I am hopeful that the communities are growing. Our communities are getting stronger and we are supporting each other in ways that are unimaginable. While I am a Chicago native residing in Baltimore, that is the community I'm primarily in right now, and the food bank that I primarily serve at, Baltimore Food Community Bank, we have so many volunteers, and we are passing out thousands of pounds of food to hundreds of people. But the more important part of that is my peers, my college peers are there every day of the week, and there are so many of us that there have been days where they had to turn people away because the space simply isn't big enough to have people in there and it not be a COVID issue. But also, while we are investing in our community, the people who own the center are also investing in us. So while you're volunteering, if you volunteer 10 hours a week, you get to take home 20 pounds of food. As a college student, that is life-changing because the 20 pounds of food or groceries can be anything that resides in that center. And I think it's really important that they are investing us to allow us the time to invest in them so that we can build our community back again.
Della, what are you optimistic about?
So I hope that the drive for our generation stays there. I hope that we continue to support each other. We continue to build our sense of family and community, because the way we are building a sense of community is supporting each other. It's putting aside differences and not allowing what someone else's ethnic background differentiates between you and another person. So if we continue to stick together, I just hope that drive just stays there to where we can make a difference. We have to stick together to make a difference. We have to make an impact together. We have to be there for one another. So I just hope that the drive to change the future and to make an impact just continues to grow, and that we continue to be a voice for those who do not have a voice or who feel they do not have a voice. And I just hope that the sense of community just becomes stronger, and that we are seeing the change that we are seeking. We are seeing the results that we are hoping to get out of everything that we're doing as far as community, as far as the youth, as far as future generations.
And Krasi?
Yeah, I guess to Delashay's point, when I think about what I'm optimistic about, it's really that despite the continued failure of institutions to support young people and to really drive meaningful, substantive change that moves us towards justice, I think we keep trying, and we also look beyond those institutions to build spaces that are for young people, that support young people, that create that change in ways that, maybe institutions just can't provide for us for one reason or another. So I think that continued hope and optimism and desire for change, paired with the willingness to go outside of the box to create it, is what keeps me going.
This sense of hope and spirit of problem solving isn't always what you hear in the headlines, so I hope you will take these perspectives back to your work and your efforts. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to do questions offline. We'll be at this table up in the front if you have questions for anyone who is part of this session. And on behalf of the Walton Family Foundation, Murmuration, and Harvard IOP, thank you for being part of this conversation and taking these perspectives with you. Thank you all.